this was my father's family. And this is my mother and father. They lived in Geneva, New York when this picture was taken.
So do you actually remember Aunt Pauline?
I remember Aunt Pauline.
Wow, because see, so you were born in 31,
Right.
and she died in 39.
Yeah,
So you'd have been 8 years old.
8 years old. I remember trying to touch her body in the casket and also to touch the baby, because the lady in front of me did that. But I was told not to even think of it. So I wasn't able to do that, but I do remember trying to do it.
And of course you would not have known your Uncle Louis, because he died before you were born.
I really didn't, no, I didn't know Louis.
Because he died before you were born.
Oh, that's why I didn't know.
So he died in 28. And
This is my mother and father here, and they're holding, it's hard to tell, but they're holding brand new babies. And there's the brand new babies right here. And those babies were called Sally and Sonny. And we are actually named after our mother and dad, Madeline and Carl. But my sister Sally never used the name Madeline. And I used the name Sonny until I became a teenager, and then I dropped that and picked up the name Carl. And then I had to use the name Carl Jr. when I went in the Air Force.
So tell me about the name Sally again.
They named us Sally and Sonny, because they didn't want to use, our birth names were Madeline and Carl. And we weren't named till several weeks after we were born, because we were surprised, and my parents didn't realize they were having twins, one of each gender, so they didn't have a name for us.
So your mom's name was Madeline.
Yes. So I became a Carl Jr., and I never used the Junior until I went into the Air Force, and then I was forced to use Junior.
Now that's a picture of your dad at his wedding.
Here. This is later.
That one, yeah, I know that one.
This is probably when my dad is probably 48 or something, or maybe 50 years old maybe.
Okay, and that's so.
My mother.
So when he's 50, you are how old? About
25.
Okay, so then you're 25 years old. That's the stoic dad you remember right there?
Yeah. Yeah, he died before I got he died right after I was married. We just had, and Margaret Ann was just born. She was just a little baby. She was born in May and he died in August. So he didn't get to know me, and I was just ready to go off to college, and I just gotten out of the Air Force. So he was always a father to me. We never had an opportunity to become a close father and son. He was always the boss, so to speak, and then we never got a chance to be pals. But he was a good father, and he worked hard, and he worked 6 days a week, almost every week of the year. Sometimes he'd work a few hours on Sunday, but not too often. But he was a hard-working man, but I always knew him as a father, never got to know him as a friend. It saddens me, because that's just the way it is. You know, when you go off to college and you get married, then you become mature. And I was always a little smarter like a kid. There I am down there, about 10 years old.
So tell me about this 10-year-old.
I'm not sure. I think that picture's.
It's at your hometown.
I think that picture is taken in Indiana, actually. I don't recognize the background. I recognize it as being a farm area in Indiana. We'd go to visit. We always try to visit some of our relatives.
So this is you And you think your dad took this picture?
Yeah, he probably did. And I never knew any of my grandfather's brothers and sisters.
You never knew you knew Aunt Pauline, that one, she was
But not his brothers and sisters. I knew my father's brothers and sisters, but I didn't know my grandfather's.
So where,
And they're out on farms in
Well, Joseph-
Indiana, I guess. But I really never knew them, and I don't know why.
okay, how about William? Point to William up there, 1862, up there is William. Over there, 1862, William. Right there, 1862 William.
1862.
Okay, now, so if you go across, William stayed alive until 1951, meaning you would have known William.
Yeah, I should have known William.
Yeah.
But they lived on a farm in Tecumseh, Indiana, and we just never visited them. I don't.
So right around when you're like this age right here, when you're this age, Dad,
Yeah.
when you're this age,
Yeah.
then the other people, other of your relatives that would be alive would be Joseph William, which is your Uncle Joe,
Uncle Joe from Baldwinsville, Stephen's father.
and he's actually still alive.
That's right.
And then there was Gertrude Ann,
Right.
and she died in 92.
That's correct.
But during this time when you were growing up, you had Uncle Joe, Aunt Gertrude,
I knew her.
Aunt Josephine with who married D. Bailey Merrill.
That's right. I knew her.
So you,
She's in her 80s now. And she's still alive, but she's very, very frail.
so and then you maybe barely knew this, like you said, Aunt Pauline,
I just barely knew Aunt Pauline.
because she died in 39, and you were only 8 years old. And then here's a good one. Carl E. Dreher Sr. So right around.
He passed away in 50.
Okay, so somewhere between this age here and this age right here, there should be, a lot of memories of some of your aunts and uncles.
Well, yes, there should be, but there isn't, because they lived in Indiana, and we moved hundreds of miles away to Geneva, New York, and we didn't. It's not as nice as it is now with your children having aunts and uncles. Our aunts and uncles were very far away, and I probably saw, from this age to this age, I probably saw my aunts and uncles 5 times in all those years.
Because they were another state away.
Yeah, we just didn't see. That's right. It wasn't that easy to do. They didn't have freeways and big highways and stuff. And also, we went through the war periods there, and then I went off to war right after '49. In 1950, I went into the Korean War. Not too long, a year after that graduation.
Wow. Really?
In March of in December of 1950, I joined the Air Force. And this is probably taken, this picture is my father within a year of his death. And he looked pretty healthy. And actually, he was fairly healthy. He had been to the doctor just a couple days before he died, and he was doing fine, but all of a sudden he had I think they call it a thrombosis, but where some plaque kicked loose in his veins and plugged his heart, and then he passed away.
So would it be true to say that this is the dad, this is one of the dads that you remember?
Yeah. I knew him then because I was living, Joanne and I, were living in my hometown, so it was just getting a chance to visit with them and talk with them
He
and share
doesn't.
some stories.
He doesn't. He doesn't look as. He doesn't look as stoic in this particular picture. Is he retired or? No, he wouldn't be retired yet.
He never retired. He was a very jovial person. He was always laughing.
Never know
Always
it.
laughing. Everybody in town. I can go to my hometown tomorrow and visit a few people, and they will always tell me a story about. And he was told not to go into politics, but he was a police commissioner. He did go that far. And but he would never tell me if he was Democrat or Republican. He'd never tell me if he had any money or didn't have any money. As far as when he died, and I read the newspaper, they called him a prominent citizen. But I never knew him as a prominent citizen if it had anything to do with money. Because we were not, I never knew any, I always thought I was poor. You know, I didn't have shoes with soles on it and that kind of stuff back during the war days. But anyway, he was a good provider. This is a picture of my grandmother, which is this grandmother here, Gertrude.
Is that her actually? That's Gertrude?
Yeah, that's the grandmother.
Okay, wait a second.
And her husband died. Joseph Michael died in '53.
Okay.
And just 2 years later, my dad died. And she was living with us, with my mother and dad, at that time. And she became a Catholic in Geneva.
So,
this is my sister Betty.
okay, so that's your mom and dad.
This is my dad, my mom, my grandmother, Dreher, and my sister Betty. She was a school teacher.
And what's the setting here?
The setting would be in the living room of our house at 118 Lyceum Street. The house my dad bought when they moved to town when I was to Geneva when I was 5 years old. And this is kind of a group picture here. And I am probably a graduate, pretty close to being a graduate. Looks like a graduation suit of mine there. That's my dad. This would be Connie.
Now you think, what do you think this picture came from? What's going on?
That would be in Geneva. And it looks to me like there's a gathering for, is she holding the baby? I can't tell.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, there's a little baby there.
this is Rick Tuttle, and he is from Terre Haute, so I can't really tell.
Well, if I,
And this is Trudy.
you can stand up for that.
So,
Well, let me you look back at this this picture, Dad, and notice that you and your dad are standing next to each other.
yeah.
I went through a lot of pictures and I didn't see any.
Huh.
Is that because he's taking the pictures always?
Usually, and either he or Connie is taking the picture. I suspect his mother or father, Rick Tuttle's mother or father, is taking the picture. I just don't know. And it also looks like I may be taller than my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't sure if I ever reached that point or not. I think I just barely did.
So, you know, like I said, if I look back at all the pictures, there weren't very many of you guys standing next to each
Yeah.
other.
Yeah.
Is that because there just wasn't that many opportunities?
There wasn't that many opportunities because after I graduated, I went off to war, and it just wasn't done that much.
So you graduated. That's this graduation picture there.
Yeah.
And then
Graduated in
you
49.
went to war.
Yeah.
And then what about this?
Well, this is a wedding picture. This is a picture of your mother and me. And we were sitting at table 246 in Toronto, I think, on our honeymoon. And look how small your mother was.
Mm-hmm. And what year did you get married?
I got married in 54.
You got married in 54?
No. Yeah, we got married in 54.
So do you...
My dad died in 55.
So back to the back to 1954. And where did you get married?
Got married in Eden, New York,
Okay.
in a little church, Church of the Immaculate Conception in Eden, New York, right outside of Buffalo. And then we had a reception at her parents' farm called the Crow Farm.
Oh, okay. So did your dad go to your wedding?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
We have lots of pictures of that, but they're on film. We've got them preserved on film. And he was a very jovial man. He's always laughing and always making other people laugh.
Hmm.
Now this picture here,
Mm-hmm. He looks happy.
yeah, this picture is famous because I think this is my Uncle Joe,
He's still alive.
and that's he's still alive, and this is their mother, and this is my father, and this picture was taken 1 month before he died, and Joe's wife, Fran, there she is here,
Uncle, see, is that Uncle Joe?
Uncle Joe,
Okay.
not Fran's, Kate. She took the picture, apparently.
So what's so what's going on here? Where are you?
We were just
Where-
Geneva. Joe and his family. This is Joe's son, Stephen,
Yeah.
and his sister, and Joe's wife, Kay, my grandmother, and then my dad and mom.
So that's your mom and dad, and around almost a month before your dad died.
That's right. Approximately a month before they died. He died.
And where were you at this time?
I don't know.
Not this day, but
I do know where I was. I was living temporarily in Buffalo, New York, or actually at the farm, working in Buffalo as a roofer. I was putting on tar on the Ford Motor Company and companies like that. It was a horrible, horrible job. Just terrible job. I just wasn't strong enough to do all that kind of work.
so if I go back and look at some pictures of your dad, you know, which one that you have got the most,
Yeah,
which
probably
memory?
This one here. Probably this memory here. This is the latest memory
Uh,
of him.
and so he's at home, and it might be dinner time or
Yeah, he's having a drink before supper probably. And I doubt that. I don't think I was in the house at that time.
And
But
so-
he would usually come home, pour himself a drink, and then maybe 9 o'clock at night he might have a nightcap. That's about all the drinking he did. And it was usually whiskey, not beer or anything. I was the beer drinker.
so
He drank whiskey.
so was there Was there drinking then in the house like when you were there or not?
Very little. Maybe at a party we'd have bottles out, but no, I don't. There wasn't any. There was alcohol in my house when I was a kid, but it was always put up and away, and it wasn't a common thing. He was a manager of a Coca-Cola company, so if anything, we would be drinking Coca-Cola. And then even that was scarce. He didn't bring that home a lot either.
So, so is your dad alive there when?
Yeah, the other memory of my dad would be this here. Now, I see I'm probably close to being a senior in high school, so he was pretty tough on me, you know, because I was 17, 18 years old and I needed to be taken care of, watched after.
So what kind of thing would he? You know, what kind of memory do you have of?
So he was pretty stern.
Him, keeping you stern. What kind of
He's a
memory?
disciplinarian.
What's an example of that?
He never used any weapons on me like his dad used to use a belt, but he never used a belt. But if I was in range, he'd catch me up in the back, hit me in the back of the head or the back of the shoulders. That's mostly what he did.
You remember?
My discipline, my punishment was usually being sent to bed without supper. So if I did something that required, you know, of course, at that age, eating was my most favorite pastime, and so I'd be sent to bed without supper. And then my twin sister, she'd always sneak a sandwich up to me.
Aw.
Yeah, that was, you know, of course, everybody knew she was doing it, I suppose, but he was pretty tough when he had to be.
So this time period here.
And so this is the same time period. We're looking at
Your twin.
junior, senior year. The twin is in the middle. And my twin was the first one in my family to die.
Wow.
She had bad blood circulation, and you can see how young Trudy is there. And then my sister Joan is back here. She has Alzheimer's now, and she's very frail and not doing very well. And Betty's retired as a teacher and took care of my mother. This is my oldest sister, Mary Ann. She lives in Connecticut. And Betty was good enough to give up her life, because my dad died in '55, and she was just a little baby. And how old was she?
Oh, that's right.
Judy was born in '43, so she was 12 years old when my dad died. So Betty, who was going to leave town, go to Rochester and find a man, she elected to stay home with my mother and help raise Trudy. And my mother had never driven a car before. And the car that she was left with is this car up here. It's this Buick. See a Buick up there?
Well, that was your dad's car?
Yeah, that was like a '53 Buick or something. '53, '54 Buick. So she had to learn. She never drove a car. And she raised all 5 sisters and myself. And school functions and stuff, we just had to take care of ourselves. It's just the way things went.
So back up here on this one here,
Yeah.
when that age period,
Yeah, so you were all young adults there.
and so would that be about the same year as you in this car up there,
Yeah.
approximately?
We probably drove to Indiana to take this picture. I don't know. I see he's holding something, so it's a confirmation of one or two of these, or First Holy Communion or something of Trudy or Rick. So that's what the gathering is about. And so we're all 17, 18-year-old. And,
So did your dad help you work on cars?
oh no, no way. I worked on this. Is old. You can see the engine in there. Pretty small engine, right?
Yeah, I can't hardly see the engine.
Yeah. Well, there isn't much engine. It's pretty simple. And the hood's opened up from the side. I had this spotlight here.
That's your car?
And I'm working on something. And I knew nothing about mechanics. Absolutely nothing about automotive mechanics.
So did your dad teach you anything about mechanics?
No, he never had time for that. I just had to learn on my own. You know, it's sort of like you kids had to do. You kind of taught yourself a little bit. You know, so every time I take it apart and I'd put it back together, everybody would laugh because there's always some parts left over. So, it was a pretty simple little engine. I have no idea what I'm doing there.
So do you remember your dad at all being handyman?
Well,
That's, find
yeah, anything they had, he didn't do any mechanical work because he was a manager of a Coca-Cola company and he had his own mechanics. The mechanics took care of his cars and his trucks.
Oh,
So he never worked on cars at home. And all he had was carpentry tools. And he would do all his carpentry work. He never hired anything done. He was an electrical engineer, so he did all of his electrical work.
he was electrical, and your dad was an electrical engineer?
Yeah, he was a
But he
crack.
worked at the Coca-Cola company?
Yeah, and that's another story that's been told before. That story had to do with the Depression. He had to get a job because he was out of a job during the Depression, so he got a job working for the Coca-Cola company, and then he ended up being a manager. And that story's on some other tapes, but and, so that's why they moved to Geneva.
So if I look at this picture when you're just a little kid,
Yeah.
let me zoom in on it here. So it says 1943,
Yeah.
and so you're like
I don't know.
9 years old or 10 years old or something.
I don't know where I am.
And but you're the only boy.
Right, I'm only boy.
In the
And this is Bill Taylor, and this is Nancy Taylor. So this is taken in Rochester, New York.
And I think of Austin a little bit, or did you have your dad to do fishing? And
No, my dad never did any fishing or hunting.
what about just anything
Actually,
with them?
no, we never went camping. Tom asked
Walking.
those questions.
Right.
No. No, he showed up once or twice at a football practice. And once or twice at baseball. I was not a good athlete, so he was really too busy. We never.
Because
Most fathers didn't do those kinds of things back in those days.
of the Depression.
No, they were just too busy. Their job was to work for the family. And he was always gone on Saturdays, so he was never a playmate, so to speak. We never had opportunity to play together, play catch or basketball.
Can't remember playing catch or
No,
basketball.
none of those things. No, he just wasn't available for it. He'd work until it was dark, and then he'd come home. And that's about it. Anything else I can talk about?
Yeah, what's this here by the fireplace? Who are these people?
Well, that's another Indiana picture. This is an Aunt Mame. Her name is Aunt Mame. And this is Joe Mutter. And Aunt Mame was a Harrington, and she was from my mother's.
Okay, so that's
Side
your
of the
mom. That's your
family.
mom in the center. That's
And this is my dad's mom. Right here.
did your mom go by Mom or Madeline or Mommy or
Well,
for you Mother?
Oh, it's just Mom. Yeah.
Mom?
Mom and Dad.
Mom and Dad.
Yeah.
So that's your
Grandma.
mom's
This is my mom's aunt,
Okay.
and my mom's brother, only brother.
Okay, that's your mom's brother.
That's Joe Mutter. He has passed away now in the last year.
Oh yeah.
This is Betty, and then this is my dad
And whose mom? And then that's your grandma.
and my grandmother. Now you notice my dad wears a tie
Right.
and a dress shirt in all these pictures.
Right. Tie and
He was always had on a dress shirt.
right. White shirt and a tie.
Yeah, almost all the time.
Now is that that's your dad's mom, your grandma?
Yeah, this is right here.
Right. And
I do not know who that picture is.
oh, I didn't think about that on the mantle. Yeah. And so I'm surprised that you said that the dad that you remember is this one up here. Is that because he's more jolly and where the rest has his tie is more stoic?
Well, see, I went through the Air Force, and 4 years later when I came home, that's when I met him.
Ooh, wow. Okay.
So this is what he was when I left.
Oh.
He was pretty stern
Oh,
and
okay.
disciplinarian,
Oh.
and he was a very jovial person, but he wasn't
Right.
with the family. He was with everybody else.
Okay.
Which
So.
is typical.
So when you went off to the service, and when you came back, you met a different.
Yeah, I
basically met a
person.
different.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. We then became adults together. You know.
and for how long? So
And
when
I
did you
was
come
married,
back?
And I got married. See.
When did you come back from the service?
I got married in, well, my last December of 1954
Oh wow.
was when I got out of service. And
So you got out of service in '54, and he died in '55.
Margaret was born in 55.
Right.
And when I got out of service, I decided I wanted to go to college. So I had to go back to high school and get physics and chemistry, or physics and math, so that I could be accepted at Purdue University.
Now was that after
So that would
you got married?
That'd be during this. After I got married.
Okay, during this period, yeah. Okay, so you already got married. You got married, and then you got a year with this dad.
Yeah. And so consequently, my first child was born when I was in high school.
Wow. Oh yeah, but you went back to high school.
Right, I was probably 23, 24 years old, or whatever, when was Margaret Ann born.
Did you know, Dad, that I went back to take high school math when I started at University of Houston?
Well, see, I had to do the same thing too.
I had to take high school math, non-credit math, when I was going to University of Houston.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so did I.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they had to take geometry
Mm-hmm.
in high school. And
So you had a year with this dad, and he's not that year. He's not a disciplined dad because you're married, and so this is the relationship kind of guy, maybe more like what you and I have now.
yeah, where we would get together on a social level there, like at one another's houses, you know. And
So would he talk about work, or got together socially?
yeah, he'd talk about his job, and I'd talk about I wanted to go to college, and I'd learn a lot in the Air Force, and I'd settle down. Instead of being a wise guy, I decided that I had to go ahead and do something, and by that, I only had one child. I didn't realize I was going to have 9, and so by the time I got into every year of college, the starting of every new year of college, I started with a new baby. So by the time I graduated, 30 days after I graduated, David was born, and he's number 5. But that was the start of the space age and space race
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of employment, it was the best, time to, for a career.
Right.
Because the career, in most cases, the money was wide open. In that we wanted to get to the moon before the Russians, and now my company is working with the Russians, buying their engines and going to space together and shaking hands.
So during that year that your dad was alive and you were back from the service, and you would talk about career stuff, but that must have been some pretty good conversations.
Yeah, he was pretty thrilled at that. He never showed it that much. We never hugged and put arms around each other. We never touched, and that wasn't too uncommon. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, it's almost expected, but back in those days, men didn't touch. You'd shake hands, all right, but you didn't do any touching, and so we never got that close. Now, had he lived another 10 or 15 years, things would have been different. We would have been buddy-buddy, I'm sure.
Right? Could you imagine his brother, your dad's brother, which is, he's over here somewhere. There he is, Joseph William.
Yeah.
Joseph William, right there.
Yeah.
Joseph William,
Yeah.
Joseph William,
That's
and then his son,
his brother here.
right? Okay, so that's Joseph William.
Yeah.
That's Joseph William,
His son, yeah.
right? And so there's Stephen Joseph, which is Joseph Williams' son,
That's right.
and they're both alive.
Right.
And so,
And they're good friends.
and they're good friends. So you're talking to Stephen quite a bit,
Yeah.
and Uncle Joe is Stephen's dad.
Right.
And have you ever thought about, the
Well, I know what you're going to
a
say.
little envy there
Oh,
about
yeah.
Stephen Joseph?
Yeah, that's the saddest part of his early death, because when I never did anything with myself. He never saw me. He saw me get married, and he saw me have a little baby, but he never saw me grow into a man. And I'm sad about that. He never. It's like Polly losing her mother-in-law, and Dan losing their mother-in-law, and even Ray Fiskus, at a real young age. And their dad never saw me grow up, and my kids never got a chance to know him or his grandmother, my grandmother.
Right. So I can't say
or
really.
aunt and uncles, for their aunts, for that matter.
The only person that can say Grandpa
So you guys are lucky.
Carl, no, is it Grandpa Carl?
Yeah.
Grandpa Senior would be Margaret, and she was 3 months old. She had
That's
3
right.
months to say that.
Right. Right.
Something like that.
Yeah.
30 days. So,
And then we moved to California, and my mother only visited once or twice. Now, we had visited her in Geneva 3 or 4 times, so they're probably the most anybody's ever seen of you kids have ever seen my mother is probably maybe 5 or 6 times.
right.
See, in the same way with my sister Joan and Sally and Betty, that's probably been, and Mary Ann, probably been less than 10 times in your lifetime,
Yeah, Mary Ann.
because just so far away.
Mary Ann's
But your
in,
kids are really lucky, because you get
Right.
a chance to, they get a chance to interface with all these all the time. So,
right. And Grandpa.
so yeah.
Life goes on.
Okay. I'm gonna go.
Any parting shots?
No, I probably have gone from here on down with others, but
Right. Well, I kind of stopped at the death of your dad, and this is like you said, this is like within 30 days of his death, and it's not that time froze when your dad died. But, you know, these times where these pictures show your dad, those times are real.
Yeah.
And
Let me tell you a story about my dad. I'm not sure how old it's probably before we were all teenagers. Certainly during this time. Probably, let's say, up to the time I was a teenager. After supper, we got our homework done. It was time to listen to the radio. And we could sit up and listen to the radio on that couch in that living room. This couch and these chairs in the living room, the TV and the radio is out of the picture.
and there's no TV, right?
No TV. And as long as we didn't say anything, we were not allowed to make one sound. And I recall to this day, I'm still mad about it, when he says no sound, that means no sound. And I sneezed. And I was out of there. He just pointed to me upstairs. And that was a rule. You made a sound. You coughed, you sneezed, snickered, anything.
You
You're out
laughed
of
at the radio program?
You couldn't make a sound. I sneezed, and I was sent to bed. And that's how stern he was.
It's the stoic dad, and that's again when you were a teenager.
Yeah, that was before I got to be a teenager.
Right. And then by the time he came back, of course, no way. I mean, it would not be, you know, this is,
Yeah, well,
right.
yeah, we're different people then.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. See, he died at 55. That would make me 24, right? So I was 24 years old. So, I'd be a young man by then. All right.
Yes. Let's see. I'm supposed to do an interview like this, I think.
So your head's over here.
That's too far.
See my hand? And the entire.
Yeah, I can see it there. Oops. Okay. Let's see. They're gonna edit it anyway, so somebody is. Oh, the date's off. Okay. Okay, Dan, for your 70th birthday, I was gonna ask you some questions about your faith and how it's made you who you are, been part of you. So, it's real informal, but I wrote down some questions, and it looks like he actually took some time, so I'm gonna go ahead and just read these questions and let Dad answer them. What was your first memory of a Catholic church related activity that you can remember as a kid?
Well, I remember one was the confirmation.
Do you remember how old you were?
No.
Do you remember your first Holy Communion or anything like that?
I remember more of the, for some reason, I remember the first Holy Communion too, because I had to wear a shirt and ties, but I don't remember the religious training part of it, because every day was religious training. I remember confirmation because my dad was there and he had put his arm on my shoulder. And I said, wow, I don't remember my dad ever putting his hand on my shoulder. I recall that to this day. So occasionally I try to do that with my kids. Don't do it very often. But arm on the shoulder, arm around their waist or something. Very rare that I do it. And I did it one time to Patty, and she was surprised. Yeah, so it's not
Little things.
and I remember it way back to then. And I remember confession one time, walking out of the confessional, and I felt like floating. first time that I ever felt like whatever I did, that's only one time in my life I remember, floating. But, every day, going to Catholic schools, both elementary and high school, so we had Catholicism all the time, had nuns. And the priests weren't not much of a presence. They were more godly until World War II, and then we saw things a little different after World War II. The priests came back after World War II, and they'd seen a lot, and they were different people after World War II.
You hold up. Okay, that's good. This is a good time to edit, Polly. Okay, we're back. All right.
Let's just go through the questions, because the next one is related. Were your parents strict about attending church in faith in God? Yeah, we did every holy day. We definitely did church, and they were very strict about making sure that I kept my commitment. And sometimes it meant 5 o'clock in the morning.
Are you glad that now that they did that?
Oh yeah,
You respect the fact that they were.
Respect that I maybe pay and give respect to my church and my commitments and my religion. And I kind of carried that all through military and stuff. Yeah. They didn't walk around quoting the Bible. We never talked Bible. We never talked faith, other than when I did something wrong. Maybe I ought to go take a visit, confession.
Now, at the same time, when your parents in general, they were kind of practicing what they preached, the fact they wanted you to go, so they were always there, they were very diligent about it, and did that make a difference to you?
No, it was just normal. They didn't expect us to skip anything. And we complied with the rules, and they did. And like I say, it wasn't a religious presence every day. We just went.
We just parked.
Mom didn't have a driver's license, so whatever we did, we had to do on our own, which was a sacrifice in itself. Just trying to get down to a church at 6 o'clock or maybe 5:30 or something. That wasn't easy to do.
So with that kind of, it's kind of leading to the other questions, but as you left home, do you think that became an important part for you? I mean, did it give you more confidence in yourself having a faith background, so to speak? Even though you didn't look at it as a faith, but...
I used it a lot in the military. Nothing else. Not that I was a saint or anything, but I very, very seldom missed a mass. And oftentimes, there were times when I'd go to mass more than once in one day.
Did it help you with, out on your own, other friends that were out on their own too? Did you go to church together with them? Did it help your, quote, fellowship a little bit?
Yeah.
Help you get to know people?
Yeah, it helped me steer people the right way. I didn't walk around with faith on my shoulder, but I told them sometimes you need faith. And maybe these are troubling times too, especially when you're a GI, and I was maybe 19 years old and pretty fancy free, and all of a sudden you go to you go off, you leave your hometown. You're away from your parents, you're away from your friends. I don't know how the military did it, but they had a way of separating all your high school buddies. When you went in there, you never saw them again. Unless it was a weekend or someplace and you just happened to make arrangements. That was very rare. And so they broke up the gangs right off the bat.
Now, did it matter that were there a lot of Catholic GIs, or did that really matter?
There was, no. I had had a lot of Catholic GI friends because I would seek them out. But I went down south, and they were Southern Baptist,
So they were,
and they were very free to tell you what they thought about the blacks. And I'm talking about 1950. And in 1950 and 51, I think probably 1950, President of the United States says, you will integrate, and you stop this other nonsense. And so that was historical for us. And as it turns out, the blacks turned against the whites, started bossing them. And that was that wasn't the right thing to do when you're down south.
so
But we made it all right. We managed to get by all right. But they were kind of tough times, and you needed some faith. I didn't know what black hatred was. And I was in service with guys that were in the Ku Klux Klan, even though you could not absolutely get them to admit it. You know, all the way up to the point of, were you? And they wouldn't answer. But there sure is a lot of hatred there. You had to be very careful, because I was immediately labeled a Yankee, and so I had to be very careful.
were you stationed down in, was it Tijuana area?
I was stationed in Texas, southern part of Texas, for basic in San Antonio, and then I went up to the Texas-Oklahoma border for a couple of years, and then down to Laredo. And the problem in Laredo was not black, it was Mexican. And they did not like the GI presence in Laredo. And if they caught you by yourself, they would hit you with bricks or knives or whatever, because they didn't like the GIs coming down there and take away their girlfriends. And, you know, those things happen. And, I had some friends, 6 of them, that were ambushed and stabbed very seriously, and they all survived, but it was pretty darn lucky that they did.
So do you think so that kind of tying in your upbringing, your faith upbringing, being not necessarily Catholic, but it did help you get through those times?
I was lucky.
Maybe
that
some
my
strength.
parents was a generation that could have gone either way as far as the black community was, but they chose never to show any hatred to anybody.
Your parents?
My parents, and I think that was a big sacrifice for them. My dad was a businessman, and he wanted to make darn sure that we were neutral on everything. So I was born during the Depression, and money and finances was a very private thing. So my parents never said anything about their financial positions. I wasn't supposed to know. None of my business. Same way with politics. It was none of my business with politics my dad was in. I think he might have been Democrat, but he wouldn't want me to know that, because he was a businessman. And he wanted to remain neutral that way, so you wouldn't offend anybody. You might lose business. So.
All right. Well, what's the next question? What did I have on there after? Did I say something about GIs?
Was it important to you that Mom was Catholic? Yeah, I think that meant a lot to me. I had several female acquaintances in the service, and they were just acquaintances. They never seemed to jump out to be anything that I would really want to continue on with. But it's nice to meet girls and go to dances and movies or something like that. It was pretty rare that I did that. Very rare. And they would latch on, and I didn't want anybody latching on. But when I met Mom on the train, things just kind of fell in shape. And the fact that she was Catholic, that made me pay attention a little bit more. Maybe it's something I could pursue. So we met on a train, and we had many hours to visit with one another. So it kind of worked out very well, something that, worth a follow on more than some of these other girls. Didn't mean anything. And I wasn't a woman either. I wasn't really that interested in getting a girlfriend or anything. It was too dangerous.
Yeah.
And they were Baptists besides, and that's, Baptists
It
are,
made a difference then.
yeah, it did. It did to me.
That's good to know.
Did you have 9 children because you were a Catholic? Well, there's a couple answers to that. One, we sort of wanted to have 10 kids. We'd talked about it. Not that there was any kind of a hard goal, but we mentioned that a large family would be nice to have. Not knowing how difficult it would be going to college and all of a sudden have one a year. That got to be bad. I mean, got to be,
Tougher.
it was very tough. Mom got so sick a couple of times that we had to be rescued. She had to be rescued. I had a man knock on the door at 10 o'clock at night. He was a college friend of mine. He knocked on the door and he had trouble talking to me at first. And I said, go ahead, say it. What's the matter? He said, I have found people that'll take care of your kids if you'll take care of your wife. And I walked right to the telephone, and within hours, Mom was in the hospital. I had to prop her up in the side of a couch when I went up to school. She was that weak. And if he hadn't have done that, there would have been some serious damage.
So what kept you from continuing to have kids even though, it was tough? Was it your faith?
Yeah, it was Vatican roulette.
Something you, yeah.
What we called Vatican roulette. And the pill wasn't out then. The only thing they had was the rhythm system, and that's what we called Vatican roulette. It was.
Like you kind of wanted
It
a
was
big
not a
family, but
But it was getting tough because Mom had to run the whole show because my job was to go to school, and it was the toughest job to this day. I'll say that was the toughest job I ever
I
took on.
believe that.
Because I wasn't a good student. I never was an A student or a B student. I was doing good to be a C student all my life. Just barely getting by. When I went to college, I got the best grades I've ever had
That's good.
because I had to. The whole priority was changed. I had to, and I fought for everything. And I'd go to class and pick up my test grades, and I'd come home crying. Yes, because I had studied so hard, and I'd get a grade that just shattered me.
Were you guys, during that time, were you pretty, did you go to church weekly and still, do all that even though you're in school and?
Yeah, we never missed anything.
And do you think that really helped you survive that?
Well, when you pray for help, yeah. Mom would go many times during the week. The lady we lived with her, she would go to church every morning. And we had other people in town that were praying for us. I needed all the help I could get, and I just know that was.
So that was a big part.
It had to be, yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, it was.
Let's see. So how did the faith in God or your faith help you through 23 years of teenagers? Was it just part of you, or you?
Again, we didn't wear the faith on the shoulders, but we were involved in a lot of church functions. And we had the teenagers involved in the church functions, I think. Now, you were in, what was that?
Well, there was Cats, and there was.
What was that organization we were with? Anyway, Cats was one of them, which was Christians Association of Teen Students, and that took care of Ardan and Tom
Mary Jo.
and Mary Jo. And then we had wasn't Scouts.
Was it CYO or?
No, it wasn't Scouts. What was you were in it?
Indian Guides was
Indian
one.
Indian Guides. Indian Guides was Christian-based because it was an offshoot of the YMCA. So again, we were all all the people in the Indian guys were Christian men. Half of them were Catholic. And so we kept that.
And that helped a lot.
It helped with the kids, just telling them how to be good. We didn't read Bibles or any of those kind of verses or stuff. So, here comes John.
Okay, we have to pause now. Here, I'll interview you from over here. Okay. Okay, we're back here. We had to go to a quieter room, so. Next question I had for Dad was, what was it like seeing your family expand by marriage and grandchildren in relation to your Christian faith?
That's a tough one in a way, because I don't, like I say, I don't wear my faith on my shoulder, but I think what I'm happy about, I'm happy that I'm Catholic, but I've never studied religion per se. So I could very easily say I'd be happy if I practiced Judaism. And so Catholicism, I think has helped me get through a lot of stuff, because I had somebody I could talk to. I could talk to my God the way I wanted to, and believe you me, I did many times. Because many times we were faced with health problems with children, or just trying to get through college, or just trying to do good in a job. And I had a lot of Catholic leaders. And the advantage there was it was easy to communicate with these people. Now, because I was Catholic and my boss was Catholic, did that help me any? I think it did in a couple of cases. But as far as my children and my grandchildren, if I wanted to be proud, I can say I'm proud that Margaret Ann is a practicing Catholic now. She wasn't for a while. She wasn't strong enough. Her husband was stronger, so she fell away, and now she's coming back. So I'm happy about that. And Tom still goes to church only when the family does. I can brag about David because he became a staunch in his faith, and he's a leader in his church. So I'm real happy about it. He practices Catholicism. He chose a Catholic wife. He's raising his kids Catholic. But the ones that aren't doing that are still leaders in their own church.
I was just going to say.
And they're all good citizens. Even Eileen is not a practicing Catholic, but she's always been a leader in the church that she chooses to be in. Mary Jo is a leader and an officer. I forget what the exact words that she is in the church that she goes to. And that's fine with me. She's a good citizen. She's doing fine for her church. She's a leader in her church. I certainly can't argue with that. And so I'm happy with that. And even those that don't go every Sunday are still good citizens. And for that, I'm grateful and I'm proud.
Good. How has, next question is, how has your Catholic experience, or Christian experience, more your Catholic experience, how's it enhanced your retirement with Mom? I mean, I notice you guys, go to church a lot together, you still associate. Does it feel good to, now that you're in retirement, is it any different than when we started out as when you were a kid going to church, and now you're on your own with Mom,
Yeah.
and is it like a special time with her when you go to Mass together, or?
Well, it gives us an opportunity to do more things together, so we do. Mom has always been active in the church. When I was going to my job, she would be going to her church and her circle of friends. And now that I'm retired, I've joined her circle of friends. And she plays cards with some of her Catholic friends, and we go to the theater, we go to shows and plays, and things like that with her friends. And I'll go to church probably 90% of the time during Lent. And so we used to do things together now. I kind of follow into her schedule, because she does things that are church oriented. So
So overall, it's been fun. I mean, it's nice.
yeah, we do fun things together. We're able to associate it with the church and their leadership, and it's fine.
Okay, well, the final question for you is, if your grandchildren asked you, Grandpa, how does faith in God help you grow up to be a happy person? What advice would you give them if they asked you that?
Well, I think that was a tough one to answer. Because faith to me gives me somebody to talk to. And you have to have faith in something. Now, if it isn't in God or Christ, if it's in Buddha, whatever, you have to have faith in a supreme being. And if you don't connect along that line, then I think that your future is going to be tough. And you should choose something that you're comfortable with. Find a religion. Organized religion, to some people they just don't want to be organized. But it doesn't mean you still can't have faith in your own way. And God is the one that'll help you out.
All right, well, that concludes my interview with Dad. I'd like to say thank you, Dad. Happy 70th birthday.
Okay, good night.
See you guys later. Bye.
Start out with questions like your first car. What was your first car?
Yeah, I remember my first car. My first car was a 36 Ford. Two-door. It had a big hump in the back and it was bright blue. And I don't think it cost me any more than $50. A friend of my dad's went through it real good. Made sure it was a pretty good car. I went down to his garage and picked it up. Just as I was ready to drive away, he said, oh, by the way.
Go ahead.
You got to edit that out.
Go ahead, just keep talking, man.
I can't keep talking with that going. Anyway, I get in the car and I was just about ready to drive down the street, and he said, oh, by the way, it's got mechanical brakes, but you know what those are, don't you? And and just the way you asked the question, I said, yeah, no problem. Well, I didn't know. I did not know what mechanical brake was. So when I got down to the corner, I found out because I had to stop the car. And a mechanical brake is a cable only. The harder you push, the better it stops. So here I am, jamming as hard as I can and hoping that I stop at the stoplight. And then it wasn't too long after that I found out that if you jam the brakes on like I did, that the brakes eventually will fade. So if you hit them real hard,
They heat up or something.
they may not work the second time. And there's a lot of hills that I got caught on going down, and I'd try to slow the car down. And by the time I got down the bottom of the hill, I wouldn't have any brakes left. And usually at the bottom of the hill, there's a stop sign.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I ever survived that thing.
Now, do you remember, did he help you out with the money, or did you have to earn the whole thing?
No, I had to earn the whole thing. I earned that, and I probably had to earn insurance. I don't remember having any big lecture about it. But it was my responsibility. It didn't take me too long before I burnt the car up.
The engine?
So I was, I had to go out and race it.
Of course.
And I had the slowest, it was a 36 Ford. And I had a guy that had a 39 Dodge, and guys had other cars that were just faster than I was. And so I ran it out of oil and raced anyway. Or I raced and ran out of oil, whatever happened, but anyway.
Blowed it up, huh?
It was, it would burn more oil than it would gas. And so I every time I went someplace, I'd leave up a cloud of smoke. And so I got to a point where I would buy used oil from Sears. And eventually, I had to go away to the Air Force, and I just dropped the car off at the place where I got it.
Yeah.
I kind of trashed it.
Yeah.
I kind of trashed it.
So where did you have a place to work on it at?
I worked on it in my driveway. I guess I was a joke in the neighborhood, because every time I work on the car, and I'd drive off, there's always be parts left over.
Well, back to brakes. Can you remember the camping trip that we took? We were planning to take when we loaded up the white Chevy van and the brown Chevy station wagon
Yeah.
with you in one car, Mom in the other, and the entire 11 kids. And we headed out and we got about a mile down the road, and the brakes went out on that brown Chevy.
Yeah,
You remember that?
yeah.
And you remember what we did on that after that?
I remember that I could stop that car like a pro just using the handbrake. It's just like going back to mechanical brakes. I used a handbrake, and I think what we did, we just left.
Well, we were heading
everybody-
camping, so we had camping gear spread out between two cars.
Yeah,
And we turned around, I think went back home, and just said, well, are we gonna try to go camping and put everything into one car or not? And I think that's what we decided to do.
we just piled everything into one car, and somehow or another we didn't have to have safety belts, so we just all took off. What car did we go in?
I think we ended up going in the van,
What van?
in the old white van.
An old white van, okay.
I remember that. We had to abort that trip because the brown, or almost aborted. We all decided to go in one car.
Yeah, I remember that, we left it at the Kmart, or on the corner of Main and someplace. Yeah, we always went to a campgrounds that had electricity, and they had kind of a frame building. Half the building was wooded, and the other half was all screened, and it had electricity. And I would bring extension cords, and we'd hang the extension cords like clotheslines, and then and actually used clotheslines, used them for clotheslines, so we almost pulled all the wires out one time. But the only saving grace going camping with 8 or 9 kids, or 11 of us, was that we always brought along the electric fry pan. And so I could virtually make an instant breakfast in that fry pan.
Yep.
That was pretty good duty. And all we ever did when we went camping was look for wood. Spent all our time looking for wood. So we had a big pile of it, and we could have a bonfire, usually on the Brazos River.
Well, did you guys go camping when you were kids? Did your
I never went
Dad?
camping. I never. No, camping wasn't things that we did when I was a child. Of course, you realize that right after I was born, we went through depression. And one way to get out of the depression was World War II. So there really wasn't time for that. So I never went camping. I only went fishing once or twice with somebody else. And I remember catching 32 fish in about an hour, fishing through the ice. All of a sudden they started hitting. You didn't even have to bait the hook. You just put it in the water and pull them out, and only
They're on there.
a pound and a half. Weren't very big, but it was just fast as you could pull out and drop it in your.
And you remember when we were camping that one time, I don't know what it was, but I guess we had an armadillo getting in our trash, and me and you jumped up out of the sleeping bags and went chasing them.
Yeah, I think we caught them, didn't we?
We were chasing them in our underwear, I think.
I don't remember that part of it. I do remember having an armadillo, and I remember being with a friend of mine, and his dog bit the armadillo right in the middle of the back. Broke through that shell.
Now, can you remember bringing the family home on a go-kart?
Yeah. This guy had worked from California. We were in Houston at the time. And he had his go-kart, and he just just had to get rid of it. I said, well, I think my boys are probably old enough they could handle a go-kart. He said, well, you might have to do some work on it. I said, well, that's what I want it for. Because one of the best teachers sometimes is teaching yourself. So I brought that go-kart home, and you guys had to work on it. Next thing you know, it was a going machine.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how long we kept it. It was go-kart, had just a little engine from a lawnmower size engine.
Mm-hmm. I remember it was a 1.5 horsepower Clinton is what it was.
So it was 1.5.
And it didn't hardly, it wouldn't go on the grass.
It would hardly go, but it went enough for you to get the bug, and then next came a dune buggy. I don't remember who bought the dune buggy.
I think I bought that from somebody.
Yeah.
And that was another, well, I remember having to sell the go-kart because we didn't have enough money for tires on it.
Yeah.
And back in those days, you would take us to the Kmart parking lot
Yeah.
on Sundays because it was open. I mean, it was closed and the parking lot was open to ride in.
Yeah.
And that was, I always thought that was nice of you. I think we loaded up in that brown Chevy station wagon.
Yeah. Anything that go in that
Do that.
station wagon. I remember, speaking of that station wagon, that I decided to put brakes on the station wagon. Richard said he'd help me. And anyway, I'd never put brakes on a car. So I jacked it up and took all 4 brakes apart, went and bought parts for it, come back and had no idea how to put it back together again.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to call one of my friends. He said, Carl, you don't ever take all 4 brakes off. You have to use them as a pattern. And even at that, when you take the parts off from the left-hand side, you just lay them down the ground on the left-hand side, facing the direction they came off. You take the parts on their right-hand side, you put them on the right-hand side or left or wherever they go, right exactly where they came off, so you know the direction to put them back in.
Mm-hmm. He came over and had to bail us all out, didn't he? Mr. Tom Rhodes, I think that was.
That was Tom Rose, and I had his jack in the car, and so we finally got it all done, and he showed me how to do it, and I did all the rest, and I did them right. And put the tires back on, and I told Richard to go ahead and tighten them up. Well, he tightened up the ones that he thought needed to be tightened, and he didn't tighten up the ones that I had put back on, which he thought were tight. But once you get them back on the ground, you should tighten them one more time. The lug nuts I'm talking about. So I load up 3 or 4 kids in the car, and the jack, 2-ton jack that I got from Rhodes, and I was going to take them back to his house. And I think Fultz was with me. And we're going down Main Street, and all of a sudden I heard this darndest noise, and the left rear fell off the car. And when it fell off, it fell inside the wheel well, so it didn't go rolling away. We just went sliding down the road. So I got out, saw what had happened. Fortunately, had this floor jack, jacked the car up, took a nut off the other wheels, off the other 3 wheels, and secured it back on again, and
Back on the road again.
drove back to Rhodes' house and told him what he just scratched his head, wished me luck. Off we go.
Okay, there you go. All right, now what I'd like to talk about is 1960 something in California, or is it in the 50s maybe, when we had their kitchen fire. What was the scenario leading up to that whole deal?
Well, Patty was born, I forget what year that is. Sorry, Patty, but I gotta think back, but anyway. She was born, and actually she was in the hospital with Mom. And she had been born, and and at the same time she was born, so was Jim Cook. And that was quite a traumatic experience, because the baby was born at home and had to be rushed to the hospital, and so I end up with, instead of Jean and Diane being at the cook's house, I had Jean brought to my house so I could watch her plus my other 6 kids. So I had 7 babies in the house. And
Speaking of
Patty
babies,
was my 7th child, so that means I had 7 babies under 7 years of age that I was babysitting. And I also had, as a surprise, I was having a wall-to-wall carpeting put in the den.
mm-hmm.
And they didn't finish up until about 11 o'clock that night.
So Mom was in the hospital with Patty. Patty was
Right.
just getting born.
She was just born. John was in the hospital because he was born at home, and he was in isolation because he was born at home. So I had these 7 babies. And I was up, I remember at midnight, the furniture was still in the backyard. So I was moving all that back in. Because
That late?
That late. And it was, I don't know, 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock before I got to bed.
Now, did you just have carpet and new cabinets put in or something in the kitchen?
No, just carpeting.
Okay.
Just the new carpeting. I had to get the furniture back in. And the furniture, most of the furniture, was pushed into any space it could be held. Which is the hallway, the other bedroom, so the kids were, and wherever the kids fell asleep, Neela Roach, the babysitter, the lady next door she just let them stay there. So finally I got to bed, and it wasn't too long after I got to bed, and little Jeannie woke up and needed a bottle. So I went in and fixed the bottle for her in the kitchen, and I fell asleep.
But those bottles, the bottles were in an old bottle warmer, those old metal things with a bunch of heat rings inside them or something. You put water in there and it boils the water.
Right.
And you don't see them anymore, of course, but they were pretty popular back then, right?
They were popular. They belonged to Neela Roach's grandmother. So it didn't have
Bottle
any,
warmer did?
yeah, it didn't have any safety devices on it.
Right.
Well, I fell asleep, and this bottle warmer went dry and started a fire in the kitchen.
And you were asleep.
The bottle melted, and the bottle, of course, was right underneath the kitchen cabinet. The cabinets caught on fire, and Margaret Ann woke up.
This is probably like, what, 1:30 in the morning now or something?
Probably, yeah, 1:30, maybe 2. And Margaret Ann couldn't breathe very well, so she came in and woke me up. So she has to be about 6 years old, maybe closer to 7. And she said, "Daddy, I can't breathe very well." And then I realized the house is full of smoke.
So, whoa.
And I said, "Okay, stay here." And I ran out in the kitchen. And I looked in the kitchen, and the fire was going in circles, round and round in circles. And I think the circle was clockwise. It was going up one side of the cabinets, across the ceiling, back down to the other side, and just rolling like that. Flames, and it's catching everything on fire that could catch on fire, of course, cabinets and ceilings. So now I knew where the fire was, and I knew there was no danger to my kids because they hadn't spread out of the kitchen. So I ran to find my children, and they were not in their bedrooms because they were any place they fell asleep. And I miscounted because I had an extra one. I'm almost in a panic. But eventually I found all the kids, and I took them into the farthest bedroom, the master bedroom. I told them to open the windows, and I closed the doors. I told them, "Do not leave this room. You can holler, scream, do whatever you want to do, but don't leave
And
this
you got
room."
all the kids in one room.
So I got them collected in one room. Then I went back to call the fire department. And as I was calling the fire department, the telephone happened to be right across from the kitchen door that went outside. So I opened the kitchen door that went outside, and I used it as a barricade because the food in the cabinets, cabinet doors are burnt off by now, and the food was exploding. And I remember seeing apricots or something flying through the air. So I'm hiding behind this door so I won't get hit by exploding cans. and I'm calling the fire department. I kept telling them my address, but I didn't tell them the city.
Yeah.
I said, sir, settle down and tell me what city you're calling from. It happened to be Woodland Hills, California. So, and then I proceeded to do something stupid. I was gonna go out and put the fire out myself, so I ran outside to get the fire hose. And I had a 75-foot hose. Now trying to find a 75-foot hose at 1:30 in the morning wasn't easy. And all I had on was my boxer shorts. And I finally found the end of the hose, then I realized I took the handle off,
So the kids wouldn't
so the
tamper
kid
with it.
wouldn't mess with it. So now I had to go into the garage to get the handle for it, which I eventually found, and turned the water on and started squirting the fire down. And then that fireman showed up, and the first two firemen in the house had mops. I remember that.
Mops.
First two had mops, and the next one came in with a fan. And then they came in with their axes and stuff and started chopping the cabinets down. And they put the fire out in pretty good order. And also, I had called the neighbors and had them come over, and they started hauling kids out. And I had no idea where my kids went to this day, and I'd have to stop and think where they all went. Probably they all went to Nora Lee's house.
Yeah, I know we were all split up there for a while.
Yeah, so I think the fire trucks came, and Neela Roach decided at 2 o'clock in the morning that she was going to take Diane and Jean back to her father's house because he's home by himself. Here I got 7 kids and he's home by himself, so she was mad that he even put me through this. And of course Annie was home. She had given birth on the floor of the house. So anyway, she hauls the kids
So
across
Neela
town.
had 1 or 2 infants in her car?
She had Jean and Diane in the car, taking them across the San Fernando Valley, which was quite a trip. You know, you had to go almost 20 miles. So she's going across town, and there's another guy following her, and he would pull up alongside her and kind of grin at her, and all she had on was a robe. She didn't bother to get dressed or anything. She was just carrying a robe with these 2 babies in the car. And she ends up with a flat tire, and the police show up, want to know if everything's okay. And the guy that was following her and grinning at her, he agreed to change her tire so she wouldn't have to get out of the car. So the police pull up and want to know if everything's all right, and she said, yes, the man's changed the tire for him, everything's going to be fine. Then he notices the 2 babies. He says, well, aren't those cute little babies?
And this is 2:30 in the morning now or something, right?
Right. And so he asked her if they're twins. She said, no, sir, they're not twins. Well, they sure look like twins. Are they sisters? And she said, well, no, they're not sisters either. And then she said, well, he asked her, well, are they your kids? And she said, no, officer, they're not my kids. And he said, now wait a minute, lady. There it is, 2:30 in the morning. You've got 2 little babies in the car. Neither one, and they're not sisters, they're not twins, and they're not yours. Now what in the heck is going on here? And so she said, well, this little baby belongs to the lady that I'm trying to go to their house, and I'm trying to get there as fast as I can. She had a baby, but she had their baby on the floor, and she's the sister of this mother, and this mother here has this little baby here, and they were staying together, but their house just caught on fire, and the cop says, oh, come on, lady, give me a break. So she proceeded to explain everything, and they eventually got the babies to the house of the father.
Yeah.
And that was the end of that story. It's a wonder she didn't end up in jail.
Pretty wild story there.
Yeah, that was pretty wild.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, we're gonna finish up after the house and the baby in the car ride.
Yeah, now we're back to 3 o'clock in the morning. My throat was pretty burnt. I got all the kids down. I can't sleep very well. I have to get up in about 4 hours to go and pick up Mom at the hospital and bring home Mom and the new baby. Of course, she doesn't know anything about the fire. So, take off to the hospital, and by the time I get to the hospital, I'm not in too good a shape. I guess I'm about ready to have a nervous breakdown or something. I recall walking down the aisle to the hallway. I'm about ready to talk to the nurse, and all of a sudden I can't talk. I remember my feet being very, very heavy, like I was marching almost. And so finally she came out from behind the desk and steadied me a little bit, and I told her what had happened. And so she said, okay, let's go down and talk to your wife. So I went down to her room, and I walked in. I don't know what my face looked like, but it certainly didn't look normal. And she said, first, as soon as she saw me, she said, what happened? And the nurse says, there was a house fire. The children are all right. And about that time, I collapsed.
Like fell on the floor or something.
Yeah. And so they held on to me, got her out of bed, and put me in bed. I wasn't unconscious, because I heard a nurse's aide head out the door saying, there's a man in maternity, there's a man in maternity.
So you swapped places, huh?
So we swapped places, and then they called the doctor, and the doctor said, well, you better get him some tranquilizers. And he said, oh, by the way, he's not driving home, so now I have to get another driver. So I called Jim. So Jim comes out and brings us all back to his house. So I don't know where anyway.
Yeah, because you couldn't go back to the house. Then you had to start farming the kids all out. I know me and Margaret stayed in somebody's house for 6 weeks or something.
I don't remember where all the kids were. I know we had a friend, Pete Brennan. He used to date Joanne's sister, Rebita, and he had married and had 4, 5, 6 kids by that time, and then he took almost all ours, except for some of the girls that went over to Neela Roach's house. So anyway, we finally got home, and the insurance man came out, and he took one look at the family and saw the new baby and saw the situation we were in, and told him that the entire house had to be completely repainted, which it certainly needed, and that the kitchen had to be completely rebuilt. All the cabinets were
Charred or something.
almost totally destroyed. So I was hoping I could remodel the kitchen anyway, so I asked the cabinet guy if it made any difference to him if he took the cabinets that's supposed to go on this one wall and put them on another wall. He said, okay, well, just do whatever you want.
Got it all rebuilt.
So I got it remodeled and got all my kids back, and there was one spot on the floor of a brand new rug, one charred spot where probably a boot from a fireman, and I forget the sequence, but anyway, the two neighbors from next door, two young mothers next door, were sitting there on their hands and knees scrubbing that spot, trying to get it out. And they're both sitting there crying, scrubbing that spot, trying to get it out before I got home. Anyway.
The unveiling of the new
Yeah, so
cabinets. Huh?
that was that story. I got the carpeting in, got a new kitchen out of it, so, and we all survived.
Yeah. Well, before we wrap up, I want to talk about some of the stuff that we've done together in the last 10 years and since I've been to Colorado. Now, what was a story that you were telling your guys when I was going to move up here? I always told them I was going to bring motorcycles.
Well, I used to kind of brag, saying that the only one way to learn how to ride a motorcycle, and that's to go get on a dirt bike, get out there and learn how to fall over and learn how to do this and do that when you're only going 10 or 15 miles an hour, and rather than get out, get on a motorcycle and hit a street. Well, I had to kinda eat my words, because all of a sudden Tom finds a job up here, and here he comes with all his motorcycles, and he finds out what I've been saying. He gets me out there in one of his bikes, and it wasn't a powerful thing, but certainly enough for me to handle, but I'm not too dexterous.
I think the first time we went, it was at Rampart, the first time we went out, you came home with a cracked rib and I came home with a broken toe, and we were hobbling in the house together, and Mom said, I don't feel sorry for either one of you.
Well, I remember going over to Handlebars, doing about a 360, got caught in a rut and hit something, and I went flying, and one other time I got caught in a rut and I couldn't get out, and that's when I think I cracked my rib.
And then that time that I took you in the Jeep that I had right after your heart surgery, and I said, oh, we'll just take this road over here.
Oh, man.
That wasn't good.
That was a couple of months after, I think, after the heart surgery. After, they cut your chest open, and then they staple it back. And so we were at it, and I had this strap belt on me, of course, and we were going across these stones and boulders. And
Oh, it's horrible. I
it
feel
was
bad.
just tearing my chest. And I just finally, so I just kept thinking,
The road's
one of these
gonna end.
days we're going to open up into a plateau, and it'll be smooth riding. And I got to thinking, well, we've already gone an hour, and we got to go back over to the same place that we came up, more than likely.
So let's turn it around.
So I better get some help, because I'm really starting to hurt, because it was wanting to tear my chest open. So I told Tom, of course he felt bad about it, but turned it right around, took a little easy on the way back, and
Made it back.
we survived that one again.
Yep.
But the thing is, that, Tom always invites me to go on these things, because I think I said earlier, I never been camping before. We introduced our kids to it down in Texas, but that wasn't really tent camping or, wilderness kind of stuff. It was, cabin where there's electricity and stuff. So I'm not really an outdoorsman, so he always gets me out doing things, and gets him out with his friends and all, which I enjoy doing. I enjoy, all the trips I've taken on these four-wheelers have really been rewarding, and on the bikes too. Get back in the mountains, and hit some of those trails, and all of a sudden you come into a whole new world. A big plateau or a big ranch area out in the middle of nowhere. We've gone through avalanches and landslides and washouts.
Yep. Yeah, we did some
All
pretty
kinds of
good stuff on the other motorcycle. Went through some high water about up to our waist that one time.
Forded a river that didn't think he could. I don't know how he could keep the bike
I don't
up,
know
and
how
me too.
kept it from keeping us
We should have been paddling, and that was pretty cold water too.
Yeah, that was pretty fun. Okay, well, it's been fun these last
Yeah.
10 years in Denver. My first 10 here, and it's been really good doing stuff and listening to all your stories. I guess we'll cut it off.
Okay.
Okay. End
Adios.
of Tom and Dad's interview. See you later. Bye.
That's good enough.